Hey everybody, I wanted to respond with some instructions on what I want to have you do in order to look into this geolocation issue that Pretty reported in her email yesterday, your time. So let's go talk about that for a moment, because what I'm noting here is that you say it works for IE, but for Safari, Firefox, and Chrome, it's not able to work. What I'm going to tell you here will allow us to check out why it may not be working for Safari and Firefox. Chrome will do separately, but if we figure out Safari and Firefox, then we may also know what's happening with Chrome as well. So let me start by showing you what we need to do here in Firefox. I've got a web page up here which I can use to quickly do my geolocation, but before I do that, let me show you a couple of things. In Firefox, we control the ability for a page to be able to ask for geolocation information on a site-by-site basis, and we control that through the page info settings. What you see here is obviously the Mac version of Firefox. This may be in a slightly different location on Windows, but the idea is you want to look for page info, and then when you get to this screen you want to select permissions, and this is all of the permissions that are applied to this particular page, or actually this particular domain. And if you scroll down just a little bit, you'll notice there's an entry called Access Your Location. This is what controls whether the website is allowed to use geolocation information and what happens in terms of user interaction when it asks. What I have set is, this is set to use the default setting for Firefox, which is to always ask. Every time that geolocation is asked for, is requested, I will always get a user pop-up. Now you want to make sure that when you're doing your work, this is either set to always ask or it's set to allow. We do not want it set to block, because it will block without telling you. So if use default is set, and this is grayed out obviously so I can't change them, but default is to always ask, that's good. But if it's not set to the default, I would unclick this and then I would click the allow box and then close this window, and that will allow or always ask. I guess I'd say use always ask, so that it will always ask you and you'll know it's asking for the information. So again, under page info permissions is where this is controlled, and it's controlled on a site-by-site basis. Okay, so I've got mine set there. Now let me show you, since we now have this set to allow geolocation for this particular site called diveintohtml.info, here's what I want you to do so we can debug any problem here. Assuming that setting is proper and it still isn't working, what I want you to go do first, if you have not got this, is I want you to go download an add-on for Firefox called HTTP Fox, and that's an add-on that allows us to watch network traffic. And this will be a very, very handy plugin if you haven't already got it. For Firefox, you'll use it for a whole bunch of purposes. Once you get used to it, it's very, very handy. Go ahead and download it, install it, enable it, do all the things you need to do, and then when we're ready to start checking out the problem, what we want to do is, again, this is on the Mac, under the Tools menu, Web Developer, you will now have this HTTP Fox entry. I'm going to open it. I'm going to open its own window, and this is what the window typically looks like. Now it's not running right now, and you'll see it in just a moment, but this is the start button, the stop button, and then you can clear the screen here if you need to. Now once you're at this point, what I want to do is we're going to want to start HTTP Fox, and we're going to want to watch the network traffic, because geolocation is done through network interactions, and you'll see how in just a second here. So this is ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and start it, and luckily I have nothing going on in the browser, so there's no traffic right now. And I'm going to go here and I'm going to click to start this process. Boom, I'm doing that, and notice I got the pop-up because I set the default setting of ask me every time, and I'm going to say share the location. Now I'm going to switch back to the screen here. You'll see nothing happening for a few seconds, but then all of a sudden we get a lot of network traffic, and there, notice that it has found me and built the map and shown the map pin here with all of this. I'm going to go back to the window here. Now I'm going to stop it because traffic will continue. In any traffic in the browser, in any window, will show up here. And I want to stop it just because we've got the map drawn, we've done all of the relevant transactions, and the one I'm interested in is way back here at the top. So notice this transaction, which is to googleapis.com geolocation/v1 geolocate with a long, long key. This is the one, the first call that's made by a geolocation request to try to figure out where I am. If I click on that, it starts to show me details down here in the window. I'm not particularly interested in headers. What I'm interested in is the post data. This is a post operation with application JSON data. So if I look at post, notice what we've got here is JSON data structures. And interestingly enough, this is how, at least on a Mac in Firefox, the browser tries to determine where I'm located. I have my Wi-Fi turned on, so it's doing that by saying, okay, I can see all of these Wi-Fi access points, and here's their signal strength. And it is sending that to Google, which then tries to triangulate my location and does a remarkably accurate job of doing it. Okay, so we want to find out if, first of all, the problem is because your permissions aren't set right in Firefox. If that's the problem, great. If that's not the problem, make sure they're set properly, and then go ahead and do this. Download HTTPFox, run this, as I have, and let's take a look at whether we see this particular call happening or not. If we don't, then we have to dig down and find out why that is, because it should be making this kind of a call to figure out what's going on. The other thing you notice here is that you get some information, not quite as much as what we were looking at in the Safari profiling, but this particular transaction started 8.18 seconds after I started the trace. It took a little more than 3/4 of a second to complete. It sent 727 bytes, it received 480 bytes, blah, blah. So you can see all that stuff. So we want to take a look at this, and if you can analyze this and figure out the problem, great. If you can't, please send me a screenshot of this. There isn't really any way to dump this information, so you just have to take a screenshot, and we'll try to figure it out from there, okay? So that is how we look at the Firefox issue and see if we can track down whether it's a permissions problem, whether it's a network problem, what the heck is going on. That'll be very, very helpful to us, okay? Well, now what I'm going to do is let's go look at how Safari does this same thing, and it's a little bit different. So let me show you this. First of all, Safari manages its settings for geolocation globally, not on a per-site basis. It's global. And you get to that by going to the Safari Reset Safari thing. Notice that I've got all of these things, including one that says Reset All Website Notification Warnings. So this is the first, sorry, not website notification, Reset All Location Warnings. This is probably the first thing you want to do here is uncheck every box except that one and click the reset button. And that will set back to default the location warnings for all sites that you can visit in Safari. Remember, this is going to be a global setting. It isn't per site for Safari. Now, I'm going to cancel out of this for now. But what I'm also going to show you, and this is the page where this information exists in Apple, is that if you ever want to disable location services to test something, again, that's global. That's under preferences. So fully disabling this is going to be on the Safari Preferences Privacy tab, and this is right here. Limit website access to location services. And the only settings are you can either deny it without prompting, make sure this isn't set, because otherwise it will fail, prompt for each website one time only, which is probably not what you want to do. I would select at least this one, prompt for each website once a day. Now that is the most granular level that Safari lets you do. Unlike Firefox, where you can force it to ask every time, the best you can do with Safari is ask once each day. But if you've already asked once for today, if you leave this set and you've already done your once a day thing, you can always go back and fully reset it by doing this, because if you do reset all location warnings, it will be reset and it won't have done it even once this day. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so that's what we want to do to make sure that Safari isn't blocking or otherwise disallowing accesses to the thing. Okay. Once we've done that, I think that I would have you go ahead and say, start the timeline recording. You are familiar with this. Go ahead and visit that site that I was at before. Let me get you the URL for that, and that's just called this dive into html5.info geolocation. I'm going to copy and paste this into Safari here. And let's go through the same process that we went through, which is that I want to watch to see what happens when I ask to have geolocation done. And that's down here on the page near the bottom. And this is, by the way, it's a very good page on how geolocation works. I would keep this around. So here's the live example. I had this running while I was loading this page, so I'm going to go ahead and clear it by stopping it and restarting it. And now let's go ahead and do this. And I haven't done this yet. Now notice this pops up. Great. Okay, I've just learned something here. I'm not going to remember my decision for one day. If you don't check this checkbox and click allow, it'll ask every time. Perfect. So let's go ahead and say allow here and let it do its thing. And it's going to take a few seconds because it's got to go off and do whatever it's got to do. And there it is, and you can see stuff going on in the background here in the thing. Let's wait for it to finish a little bit, which is kind of our best guess. We'll stop the recording, and then again we'll scroll up here to the top, and somewhere up here will be, there it is right there, I believe, which is, that's probably our get static map service. Now I'm not an expert with this particular thing, but let's go take a look. I'm going to try to move this here so we can see it. Yeah, that is the request to actually get our location. And as I say, I don't quite know enough. Here, I'm going to filter to just this. I guess I'll leave that. I don't quite know enough to know how to get the JSON output from this. I will figure that out, or maybe you can. But the whole point here is that I want to see. It took a half a second before we started asking for the location, and that's all browser time. That has nothing to do with us. That's the browser trying to decide what it wants to do. Once we made the request to try to get our location, it took just a little under 3 seconds in order to complete the round trip to the Google servers and to get back, again, a pretty accurate answer for this thing. So if we have problems here in Safari, we want to make sure the permissions are set properly through the process I showed you. We want to start up the profiling here, and then we want to run it while we go out and do a get location and watch to see what's happening here in the profiling window. Now, by the way, you don't have to use this one. This was a simple one. Obviously, you will want to use the geolocation that you've got in our web page that you're developing, but the idea is basically the same. Okay? And again, if you have a problem here, this can't be exported, but go ahead and take me screen snaps, and then we can talk about it tomorrow morning, my time, in the evening, your time. Okay, that's it. Talk to you tomorrow.